The Resident Evil franchise is back with not one, but 4 new campaigns for you to sink your teeth into, each one boasting hours of gameplay and plenty of virus-infected baddies for you to dispatch. So will Resident Evil 6 live up to its high expectations, or much like the giraffe on the cover, will it make you want to blow yourself away? Let's find out. In Resident Evil 6, you'll play one of 4 intersecting campaigns which, generally speaking, share a common goal: eradicate a new virus known as the C virus. While the overarching goal is the same, each campaign does have its own objective, but they intersect at key moments. The first thing players will notice is that graphically the game looks gorgeous. Everything from the lighting effects to the textures to the slobber dribbling off the mouths of voracious zombies, it all looks great, even on the console. The level of detail is pretty extensive as well. You'll notice your enemies actually reacting to where you've shot them, and much to my delight, bits and pieces will fly off of their reanimated corpses accordingly. The level design is where I had my first problem though. From an aesthetic standpoint, they're great, but in terms of actually being able to explore, everything just seemed a little bit too scripted sometimes. I remember the days of Resident Evil when it was much more about free exploration. Now in this segment, for no real reason, I have invisible walls. A minor issue, but one that was a little off-putting.
You're right.
Aside from the graphics, another positive this time around was the sound design. The musical cues were very well done for the most part, though the "this is a scary moment, be startled" sound got a little old after a while. The sounds for the firearms were also excellent, and pretty much nothing beats the noise of a zombie's head popping from a well-placed shot or a nice curb stomping. Finally, I'd be remiss if I didn't mention the voice acting, which too was very well done. Now let's talk about gameplay. Much of the criticism about the last Resident Evil was that it wasn't a survival horror game, so fans of the franchise will at least be a little comforted to know that one of the campaigns, Leon's, definitely has some survival horror elements to it. While the "I thought that guy was dead, but he's not" scare was a little overused, there were definitely some genuinely scary moments. The creep factor in general was quite high at first. Even during the creepy sections though, there are some things that take you out of the survival horror experience. I remember Resident Evil having a penchant for the over-the-top, but I don't remember Leon doing moves straight out of WWE.
Set up my page! I don't believe it!
At around the halfway point of Leon's campaign, we see more and more action until it reaches a fever pitch, and the game never really turns back. Is it really a bad thing though? Personally, I like it when games evolve. Otherwise, it's just the same game with updated graphics. A big thing going into this installment of Resident Evil was moving and shooting, and the issue became really hot after Operation Raccoon City was released. But in this one, they've reached a happy medium. I present to you walking and shooting. I think it works great, keeping the suspense of having to stop and shoot while allowing for the realism of, well, being able to move and shoot. The addition of actively being able to dodge things was welcome to me as well. Once the game becomes a full-on action fest, as I've mentioned, in the following campaigns nothing changes, so if you're someone who was in love with survival horror, even though you won't be going in chronological order, I recommend playing Leon's campaign first and moving on down the list through Chris and Jake and Ada's. It does a nice job of easing you into things. Many people will complain that the game isn't true to Resident Evil, but rather than whine for nostalgia's sake, I think we should look at the rest of the game and consider it for what it is: a good third-person shooter. In the last half of Leon's campaign and in the following 3, you won't be creeping around many mansions, but you will fight some of the most grotesque monsters you've ever seen, and with some excellent mechanics. In fact, Resident Evil 6 does some things as a third-person shooter that I thought were not only good, but subtle and genre-expanding innovations. Now hold on to your seats, kids, because you're about to see me go into cover, but by no means is this a cover shooter. I really liked how the screen blurred slightly while I was in cover there, and kinda wish other third-person shooters would use this mechanic. That being said, a minor complaint I had was that the movement was sometimes a bit clunky, especially when trying to make sharp turns, but the addition of rolling and diving helped this greatly. My biggest complaint for Resident Evil 6 would have to be the boss fights. While the boss fights in many cases were quite epic looking, I found them a little too formulaic. Most of the time a case of do the same thing over and over again for 10 minutes until something good finally happens. Also, there's no real indication until toward the end of any boss fight that you're actually beating it. I don't mind there not being a health bar, but the infected you're shooting should at least start to show some overt signs of wear and tear. In terms of multiplayer, literally the entire game can be played as 2-player co-op, and there are even some sections where you can link up with other players online for some 4-player action. In addition to the campaign though, there's mercenary mode where you try to kill as many zombies as you can within an allotted time limit, and my personal favorite, troll other players while they try and beat the campaign mode. I mean agent hunt mode. I have to say, even though I felt a little bit like a douchebag, it was pretty amazing being the one to tear Leon's throat out and drag him off screen. I had a lot of fun ruining other people's single-player experience, and will probably go back to doing it after I'm done with this review. The good news for people that don't like trolls like me is that you can turn off agent hunt mode while you're playing single-player, but that's no fun. Come on, let me into your game, just do it. Just keep agent hunt mode on. Please? Overall, while only a small portion of Resident Evil 6 contains the survival horror that we're all used to in Resident Evil games, the remainder is still a wild, fun, over-the-top, albeit sometimes too over-the-top third-person shooter with lots of memorable moments. The only big problems for me were the formulaic, sometimes repetitive boss fights, and that at times movement was a bit clunky, but in the end, Resident Evil 6 is a great expansion of the series that delves deeper into the lore that we all know and love. I give Resident Evil 6 8.5 exploded zombie heads out of 10. For more news, reviews, and general Smoshy shenanigans, be sure to keep it locked right here to Smosh Geek.